The cowboy named Hugh was born with synesthesia that made every color produce a musical note. He saw a red barn and heard a trumpet. He saw green grass and heard a violin. Blue sky was a flute. Yellow wheat was a piccolo. Brown earth was a bass drum. Hugh could not explain his gift, so he stopped trying and lived alone on his Montana ranch. He wore sunglasses to mute the noise because bright days were symphonies that gave him headaches. A blind painter named Palette lost her vision in a car accident 10 years ago but never stopped creating. She mixed colors by memory and touch and smell, but she missed the landscapes of her childhood Montana. Palette hired Hugh to be her eyes and ears combined. He would describe the prairie and she would paint it. Hugh agreed because he was lonely and she smelled like turpentine and courage and something he could not name. They sat on his porch at sunset and he said, "The sky is a cello, deep and sad and orange." Palette mixed cadmium orange and ultramarine, and her brush moved across the canvas without hesitation. He said, "The grass is a violin section, green and hopeful and a little bit scratchy." She painted viridian and sap green, and her hands trembled because she had not painted grass in 10 years. He said, "The river is a harp, blue and silver, and each ripple is a plucked string." Palette painted cerulean and white, and her brush danced like the water he was describing. She finished the painting and turned it toward him, and Hugh fell silent because the canvas was perfect. He whispered, "You painted exactly what I heard." "How did you know which colors match which sounds?" Palette said. "I did not know. I trusted your voice. Your voice told me everything I needed to see." Hugh realized that she had not painted the landscape. She had painted his description of the landscape. He asked her to paint the sunrise the next morning, and he described it as a choir of angels warming up. Palette painted pinks and golds and lavenders, and when she finished, she said, "This is the best thing I have ever made." Hugh touched her hand and said, "You are blind, but you see more than anyone I know." She said, "I'm not blind to color. I just see it through other people's voices. Your voice is very colorful." He asked what color his voice was, and she said, "I do not know yet. Let me paint it and find out." Palette asked him to speak about anything while she mixed paints and closed her unseeing eyes. Hugh told her about his mother's funeral and how the black dresses sounded like a bassoon playing alone. He told her about his first horse and how the brown coat sounded like a cello learning to be brave. He told her about the day he realized he was different and how the gray shame sounded like a muted trumpet. Palette painted while he spoke, and her brush moved faster than he had ever seen anyone move. After an hour, she set down her brush and turned the canvas toward him with tears on her cheeks. Hugh looked at the painting and saw a face. It was his face. She had painted his portrait from his voice alone. The portrait showed a man with tired eyes and a crooked nose and a mouth that wanted to smile but forgot how. Hugh touched the canvas and said, "How did you know what I look like?" "You have never seen my face," Palette said. "I painted the sound of your voice. Your voice has cheekbones. Your voice has wrinkles from laughing alone." He wept because no one had ever seen him through a sense he could not control or explain or hide. "You said, 'What color is my voice?' You said you would tell me when you finished." Palette touched the wet paint of the portrait and said, "Your voice is gold. Not yellow gold, warm gold. Like honey in sunlight." She continued, "Gold is the color of things that survive fire. You survived being different. You are gold." Hugh kissed her for the first time, and her lips tasted like oil paint and truth and something golden. He pulled back and said, "Your lips sound like a flute. That is the highest compliment I can give anyone." Palette laughed and said, "I have no idea what a flute sounds like, but I'm choosing to be flattered." He proposed to her in the same spot where he had first described the shallow sky and the violin grass. Hugh said, "I want to hear colors with you for the rest of my life. You paint my sounds into things I can see." Palette said yes and added, "I want to paint your voice every day until I run out of gold paint." They got married on the porch at sunset, and the sky sounded like a full orchestra playing his heart. Hugh's vows were, "I promise to describe every color so you can paint it, and every silence so you can hear it." Palette's vows were, "I promise to paint your voice into every canvas so the world knows what gold sounds like." Their first dance was to no music because Hugh said, "The sunset is playing a waltz. Can you hear it?" Palette could not, but she felt his heartbeat, and that was a better rhythm than any orchestra could play. They moved into a small studio together, and Hugh became her full-time color translator for all her paintings. Each morning, he would describe the light, and she would mix paints, and they would create art as a married team. Their paintings sold for thousands of dollars because no one could replicate the collaboration of sound and blindness. Critics called Palette's work synesthetic landscapes, and she always credited Hugh in every interview. She would say, "I am blind, but my husband sees colors with his ears. Together, we have 20 senses instead of 10. Hugh remained anonymous, but he attended every gallery opening and stood beside her with his hand on her shoulder. He would whisper what the gallery lights sounded like silver flutes, and what the wine glasses sounded like crystal bells. Palette would squeeze his hand and whisper back, "You are my favorite color, and my favorite sound, and my favorite everything." They had one daughter who inherited her father's synesthesia and her mother's artistic talent and neither disability. The daughter could hear colors and paint them without needing translation, and her parents wept at her first gallery show. She painted a portrait of her parents, Hugh with his eyes closed and Palette with her hands on his face, and the whole canvas was gold. Hugh asked, "Why gold?" And his daughter said, "Because that is the color of love that does not need eyes or ears." Palette developed arthritis at 65 and could no longer hold a brush, but Hugh described colors and she dictated to their daughter. The three of them painted together until Palette's hands stopped moving, and then Hugh held them and described the sunset one last time. He said, "The sky is a harp. The clouds are flutes. The sun is a trumpet saying goodbye to a brave woman." Palette smiled and died with her head on his shoulder and her hand on his heart and her ears full of his voice. Hugh survived her by 4 years, and their daughter painted his portrait every day so she would not forget the shape of his silence. He died at 88 and his last words were, "The room sounds like gold. That means you are here. Both of you." Their daughter buried them under a cottonwood tree with a paintbrush and a pair of sunglasses between their graves. The gravestone reads, "He heard colors. She painted sounds. Together they made the world louder and more beautiful for everyone." Every year, artists visit the grave and close their eyes and listen to the wind through the leaves and swear they can hear gold. Hugh and Palette proved that losing one sense does not make you poor if you find someone to share the senses you have left. If you feel different or broken or too strange to love, find someone who will translate your oddness into art and then hang it on every wall. Subscribe to Stories Hub Official for more emotional Western romances about the symphonies hiding in silence and the paintings hiding in blindness. Share this video with someone whose voice you would paint, even if you had never seen their face, because that voice is the color of home.